everyone, my name is Venessa Knizley and thank you for coming back to my channel. Today I am doing another author interview. I am here with Bethany Riehl. She is the author of the Child of Deliverance series. I've got that right here. The earth is full and the heavens are telling, and we will talk a little bit about those. And also trending. And did trending come before or after Even If?
Before.
Okay, and I don't have a physical copy of Even If. So, but it's got a little hand-holding thing in a field, so similar.
That's true.
Yeah. I want to open up today, Bethany, with a review that I wrote on Amazon for you, because I've read the first two books, the Child of Deliverance series, and then I did not do trending because I wrote the endorsement on the back of your book. That's me. I was very excited, by the way, to see my name right there. And so, but I looked on Amazon and I said, oh, I didn't write anything there. Why not? I said, writing this review after my second time through reading it. My endorsement is on the back of this book, but I'm here to say that I fell even more in love with the story now than I did when I wrote it. Completely immersed in the vivid imagery and the depth of characterization. Love Creed and Amelia. Love this book. And if you haven't read her other book, Even If, you absolutely should, because it's even better. She outdoes herself every time, and so I keep asking her to finish me something else to read. Can't wait for it.
Thank you.
And I do that from time to time.
Yeah, you do. I'm working on it.
But we have gotten together a number of other times to discuss writing in general and like kind of tips and the newbie experiences of getting books out there. So today I really do want to focus just on the books themselves.
Okay.
So all of your books have 5-star ratings or close to it, like 4.8, 4.9. They'll show all the stars are colored in yellow. So that is the point. And which I think is very well deserved. And I started with your Child of Deliverance series. Now we have mentioned those a little bit in the other videos, but for those who haven't heard, could you give a quick where did you get the idea for these two?
Child of Deliverance. So I had actually gone to church to listen to some ladies giving a talk about a mission trip they took to Thailand. And what they had done was they had gone with an organization called Bethany Riehl to just tour their facilities, see what they do. And then one of the nights they take a tour on what's called Walking Street, which is where well, not all of them, but where a lot of children are trafficked right in front of everybody, really.
So like they have a video of it that they show? Like in the church?
They showed pictures that of, young girls. I think what stood out to me the most was girls that couldn't be more than 14 wearing really sexualized outfits. And they were talking about, what the work of Bethany Rescue is. They'll go in and pretend to be Johns and offer the girls freedom, basically, and rescue them out if they want to, and then help not rehabilitate sounds funny, but they'll give them an education, give them jobs, give them
reintegrate,
reintegrate. Right. And they were explaining there's reasons. They go to Cambodia as well. There's just a whole lot of layers of why that's going on over there. And some parents sell their children thinking that they're sending them off to work in a restaurant and that the money will be sent back home, and they don't really know that they're not going to a restaurant. And
do they ever send money back to the parents to like further that story?
Do sometimes. I'm out of practice of knowing how that all works. So I'm certain there's times, but also how would you chase them down and
so I was wondering, do they just drop the pretense and then like kind of split?
Yeah, I'm sure it varies based on who's doing what. And some parents tell their kids they have to go into the sex trade and threaten them, if you don't, I'll send your younger sibling, and things like that. So girls feel very trapped. And I was standing there listening, and at the time my children were 1, 3, and 5, and they were saying that children as young as 4 can be trafficked, and now I'm sure it's even younger. And I just felt this just awful feeling wash over me. And it had felt like the Lord had been leading me up to, I'd been thinking about writing a lot, and I'd been trying to figure out a story. And it was the first time I found out you could self-publish to Amazon and things like that. And I had been actually up late thinking about that the night before. And it was like I was standing in that room and thought, well, this is the story I'm supposed to write, and not for money. I actually walked up to the gal afterwards and said, I'm going to write a book about this, and it's going to be a fiction book so that people know what's going on. And she's like, oh, that's nice. Like what she was supposed to say to that. And I came home and told Richard that, and he again was like, that's nice. I'd never finished a book before, and then I finished it and then wrote the second one. And I still have the third one in here, but like the world is changing so quickly since I wrote those 2 books that there's just so much I want to capture that I can't even get a handle on. And every time I think, okay, this is it, this is the thing, something new will explode out. And it's almost like the story is so big that I don't know how to write it anymore. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And the Lord so clearly set you up for that moment, like to get your brain engaged the night before, to have you standing in the back of the church. It doesn't even sound like you were sitting down.
I don't know how I stood through it because I was just so overcome. And now looking back at all the Lord did from that moment is just crazy to me that I was standing. It feels too big of a moment standing in, I guess. I don't know.
Well, standing to me seems like more of the moment. Like you were really taking it in. Like you couldn't sit down. You were just frozen. Yeah. So it was funny as I got it, but honestly, I put it off quite a while because it is such a heavy topic. I'm like, I don't want to read about child trafficking.
Right.
And I was like, but you know what? I'll get into it. I opened the book somewhere maybe in the first quarter, and I started reading about Luchin, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I kept reading, and then the way you set it up was a chapter about Luchin, a chapter about Lydia and her life in the West, or in the United States, and kind of building up to this mission trip, to her life not wanting to going, working through. And so, but then meanwhile, you see their lives are going to intersect at some point. And so then you see Luchin's life being sold into trafficking, these dreams that she's having, and her life being set up. And so when I was so engrossed in Luchin's story that when I got to Lydia, I was like, who, what? And I just passed it. And I was like, oh, Luchin's next, or every other chapter, or whatever it was. Yeah. And so I literally skipped every chapter of Lydia, and because again, I am a historical kind of girl. Luchin felt like a world I didn't know, so I was very engrossed. And the modern contemporary, I was like, eh. So yeah. I read all of it until they combined, and then I was like, oh, I don't know anything about Lydia. Dang. I went all the way back to the front. Then I had to start over, finishing up Luchin's story because I hadn't started at the beginning of hers.
Right.
And then, or I might have gone back earlier to do that. And so then I went back, and then I just read all of Lydia's, skipping over Luchin's because I'd already read it, till I got to where they intersected, and then I felt like an idiot. And I was like, well, that would have been really nice together.
I love that you read it that way. That's really funny. And that it worked.
It totally worked. I mean, if you want to just read one thread and then the other, you can. And then was very excited for the second series, which still involved Lydia, some more characters, and a really bad guy.
Yeah, that guy's icky.
Oh, he was icky.
That one was harder to write.
Yeah, but so where did you get your inspiration for that guy? In the second book, there's this guy who's sort of on the side of trafficking, but an American guy, right?
Right, he's a customer.
Oh, right, he's a customer, but he'd make money off of it or something if he could, right?
He makes money off of something else.
That's right, and it tricked me.
Which was I actually heard that. I read a news article about like what they end up finding in his home. I had actually read an article about that and was like, well, that's interesting. And I just, for some reason, worked it in there.
Oh, you did well, because I was like, oh no, there is just that thing where you think it's one thing and it's another.
Right. Yeah. Somehow that came into it. I don't even remember how. I read that story and was like, well, that's weird. That's interesting. Oh, that could be. And so that's where that got worked in. I think Gage is his name. I was trying to understand who would go there. And I don't want to understand who would go there, but I guess I wanted to show layers of that. And the second book was harder to write. I think it's more raw. I still try not to traumatize anybody with the book because that's not what I want to do, but I had to be more real about different scenarios that people go through in that realm and hypocrisies and things like that. But the third book in my mind has always been about, okay, the way you stop this is to get the hearts of the men who are purchasing. That's the only way to stop trafficking, in my opinion. Otherwise, we're just rescuing girls all day long after the trauma. How do we get before the trauma? And actually, Destiny Rescue does try to do that. They go into communities and try to set up organizations to protect the girls from the trauma in the first place. And boys, it's not just girls. But I was thinking, but at some point, I mean, sin will always be here until the Lord comes to get us and to make this world new. But to me, it just is very heavy on me that the only way to really stop trafficking is to get the hearts of the men who are interested in young girls. And how do you do that? And so that's really where the third book is in my head. So, and I knew that all the time. And so the middle needs to show who these men are, right?
Right.
And that's why I can't get there because I don't know the answer to that. So
did you question any men for that character? Like,
I question my husband a lot because he's
like, what would it take to get you to that place or something like that?
Yeah, well, and I would say, can I read this to you? And does this sound totally out of it? Is this realistic? And he did not like hearing about Gage. It creeped him out. He was like, yeah, it's fine. He didn't like it. But he worked with a lot of
But he's a police officer. We should know that he used to be a police officer.
Retired police officer, right. So
he knows a lot of this stuff. He comes across it.
Unfortunately, he's dealt with a lot of that stuff. And
that in particular?
Yes. Yeah, he has.
Really?
And he's dealt with, it's interesting, we were just talking the other day that he was a resource officer in schools for a while, and there were a lot of kids. He said it's so hard because you'll see kids that are going to be that kind of a person, and you can't do anything about it. You're trying to have a relationship with them, just build rapport with them, but anyway, and he's had a few of the kids that he just knew would be that way get arrested for being that way already as adults now, like this many years later. So he's definitely seen it. He doesn't understand it, but he knew he was some I could bounce questions off of.
Was he, what do they call him? Was he like on the sex investigation kind of? No, none of that kind of stuff. Just come across it? Right,
as a street cop or in the school district, you would come across just a lot of that kind of stuff.
For me, I felt like you really did a really good job. They were raw in content, meaning, I guess I mean by that you were you exposed it for what it was, but going through the life of Luchin, you said, right? Suchin, going through her life, when it came to those moments where, she had instances where she was with a man or was about to be, you did not go into detail in those areas. You knew what was going to happen, or you got the aftermath of her reaction, her sadness or her despair or her feelings of fear or whatever it was that she was going through. And so it really wasn't necessary to give the detail of the exact moment. I mean, you can just imagine as a woman, going through it. You don't, and part of us really can't imagine. So whatever we think we imagine is 100,000 times probably less than the actual, feeling that yourself. So I thought you did really well there. I didn't regret reading them. I didn't feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't taken that into my brain.
Yeah, good.
All those things. So I think that you can safely engage yourself in these books and feel the heaviness of the subject, and even be more apt to pray over it. In fact, I would see the Destiny Rescue stuff come up on my Facebook for a long time. And I would repost those and pray for those. And so that was more on my radar than it had been before.
Yeah.
Moving on to trending. I want to move on to trending. So why don't you give a quick overview of this particular trending?
Okay. So trending is kind of a reconnection of high school friends. So the girl, Amelia, basically opens at her high school reunion. She runs into Creed. She hasn't seen Creed since they graduated, and she had always had a crush on him, even though they were just good friends. And so at this reunion, they're given, it's their 10-year reunion, and they're given a letter that they wrote to themselves at graduation. And someone saved them and kept them, and, you know, so their future self is reading what their past self has to say. And Amelia realizes that she has spent her whole life based on this one promise that she made to herself to be true to her future husband, and she's taken it too far. She's basically acting like she's married. Every decision she makes is thinking of this future husband, and it's not necessarily things that she wants to be doing for herself. And so she meets Creed and kind of rekindles with him, and he's now ready probably to think about a relationship, but for the first time she's not thinking of a future husband. She's just making decisions for herself. So that's
and his past sort of stopped him before, when he was thinking about it before, is he was kind of a playboy.
Yeah, in college.
Yeah, so they were like best friends, but he was a playboy, and she watched him recycle or go through all these reuse all these women, and she never wanted to be one of them, despite the fact that she loved him.
Right.
So I wanted to ask about that, because I think you do a really good job of creating backstories without having huge amounts of information, but it's they each have their own individual, they're conflicted individually in these different ways, which I think, in my opinion, really deepens a character, because you're not just dropped into the here and now, you're dropped into their hangups. Where did you come up with these particular hangups for these two characters, the playboy and the sort of making marriage, the husband, like an idol?
So it's frustrating because I can't remember the origin of trending in my mind. I really have a hard time trying to remember why I came on that story. But I know, at least for Amelia, I had read a book in college, well, the end of high school, actually, called When God Writes Your Love Story. And I had this good guy friend in high school, and we had played with the idea of a romance, and it wasn't correct for us, but I think the Lord is just protecting us from hurting one another and hurting our future spouses. Does that make sense? So, but there was a time when I was reading that book, and he had feelings for me. We hadn't revealed those feelings to each other. But I had asked him, in this book, it said, get some people around you that'll pray for your future spouse with you. And so I had asked him to pray with me for my future spouse. And he later told me how grumbling that was to him. Like, ugh, he did not like that. So,
because he wanted to be or he liked you at the time. So
yeah, I don't know why he didn't think, well, that's going to be me. I think he knew it wasn't going to be him. And so it was just, for some reason, that was really irritating to him at the time. And so that kind of stuck in my memory. And I remember in that book, Leslie Ludy and Eric Ludy are the authors. They're husband and wife now. And they were kind of in the genre of I Kissed Dating Goodbye. I never read that book, but I read theirs, and they were similar. They were creating similar reactions in people at the time. So I was thinking, I had always regretted I made some really serious romantic mistakes in my life. I have a few that the Lord stopped, probably for the sake of other people, but there were a few he let me just be rebellious. So like trending, I think, was born of all those thoughts and all those realizations and all those things, but also the part of me that wished I would have been as steadfast as Amelia was in sticking to her conviction, because I could have just not hurt anybody, and I could have not hurt myself and could have not hurt my husband, and but I didn't. And so I had always thought for years, I had an idea in my head of what would a book look like, like those choose your own adventure books that we used to read as kids.
Yes, I love those.
What would a book look like if it was, if I could explore what would have happened if I would have gone the other way. And so Amelia, I think, was born out of that idea. And then because it's a story and because life is not that clean, I realized that would have been messy in its own way. And it could have been if I stuck to that too strongly. But in that Eric and Leslie Ludy book, they had said, I think I quote, I have Amelia say something similar in her little letter, that like being faithful to your husband is being faithful all your days, even the days before you know him. And I don't know how much I agree with that at this point. I mean, I do, but it's more just be faithful to the Lord and everything, and that will in turn be good for your husband in the future. So that's where her story came from. And I needed Creed's story to interrupt her story. And so his really came out of, as I was writing, I needed his to come along that way to explain why she was the way she was. Does that make sense?
This is the other side, the other extreme of going down those trails of sin, which is sort of even if follows that trail. The character has gone down a trail of sinning, and how this affects her in her future relationships. So you have these two opposite ends.
Right, yeah.
And I don't think we should shortchange either end, realizing the depth that sin affects us, or opportunity for idolatry in our lives, even when haven't.
Right. Even when we make the right choices, we all have something that we could be holding back from the Lord, and they all have the same result. Like, or should.
Away from the Lord is away from the Lord. If you're holding something else up on a pedestal, if it's not God.
Right. You're
looking at the wrong thing.
More her sin is fear, really. Fear of living outside of that. It's just she's not willing to take risks. And it's hiding behind that decision to, oh no. And it came from someone unwise speaking into her life that she listened to over probably listening to the Lord. So
now you have a little 7-year-old girl in that book. Creed has a daughter named Izzy, I think. And I get names mixed up in my mind too. I generally don't like reading about children. I would say in general. Either. I'm like, if there's a child, I'm like, please don't let them talk. Because I think as adults, we don't get it anymore. Like the simplicity of their minds and everything. Yeah. But I felt like either was one of your children 7 at the time, or
I must have had a 7-year-old at the time. I'm trying to remember when I started the book, I had a 6-year-old, I believe. My middle daughter was 6 or 7. And so like Izzy likes the books my girls would like. And I don't know though that I really based her off of them. I don't like reading about kids either. So I think I was trying to not be obnoxious with her, but give her enough of a voice because she matters to the story.
Right. Yeah, she did.
But yeah.
My daughter's 7 and she's kind of feisty. So, Izzy would say different things than my daughter would, but I could imagine those things coming out of their mouths. That's fairly realistic. And more so than that, when Creed took her onto the show and he was on the news show, basically Izzy's main part was like,
because that's what a kid will do.
Punch down in the chair, like, can we go home now? Like, and bursting into tears when they're really stressed out. And so there was, I felt like, appropriate childlike reactions.
Yeah.
There wasn't a ton of dialogue, and I just enjoyed that. I felt like it was the perfect amount.
Good. Oh, good. Thank you. That's important.
Is there anything else that you would tell your readers, a little snippet or anything about that book before we move to another one?
Okay, so I share it a lot because I'm really dorky about it. There's this video that was on YouTube at the time that gave me the idea for Creed and Izzy that went viral, of a dad and his daughter singing. And my kids love this video, and I changed it just enough to not be copying them, but anyways, this little girl, the description in the video is that she can't sleep because there's fireworks. And so her dad gets on like all his nice equipment out, and you can tell they sing together a lot. And they're singing this song, and every once in a while she goes, shh, and they stop and listen to the fireworks, and then he'll just start strumming the guitar, and the way he looks at her is so dreamy to me. And I'm like, when I watched him, like, those are the moments that I look at my husband and I'm like, oh, Hamina, you were just like watching him interact with his children. And just that's who Creed is in my mind, is just a man who is a dumb college kid that has this child of his dropped on his doorstep, and now he's created this whole relationship with her, and this whole life he took on the role of dad really strong. And that's what that video is that goes viral, is because of just how he looks at her, and women are swooning about it. And it's just, so I love to share it every once in a while just because I want other people to swoon over that video with me.
If you find it,
I'll share it.
And I'll put it on the comments or in the description.
It'll be down at, yeah, it's so cute. It's just the cutest.
You tend to have a little twisty thing in each of your books. I think, I'm trying to think, well, at least in the second one that you did, The Heavens Are Telling of the Child of Deliverance series, there was that little twist with the Gage, the bad guy. You thought one thing was going to happen, but it was another. Mm-hmm. And then in this book, Trending, you bring in a little topic of the mother, and then things happen just when you least expect it, and you're just like, it always fits though. It's never like out of nowhere and then, well, how in the world did that happen? It's, oh my gosh, she went there. And so that was fun. And then, so we'll move on to Even If. I won't even go with that one. There is something mentioned in the beginning of the book that you think everything's going well, and then you just sucker punch us with this.
Sorry. I remember you editing it and writing me and going, I'm really confused because it feels like the wrap up, like, but I'm only halfway through. I don't understand. And I was like, sitting at home like, you will. And then I was nervous, like, oh no, is she going to be super bored when she reads the rest of it if she's done with the book already?
I don't remember being bored with it. I just remember thinking, I feel like that's, I couldn't see what was going to happen. So It was a good, now I've mentioned it in other videos, but I did help you edit that book. I really enjoyed editing because when you have to read through something multiple times, you know, it's always a blessing when you actually like what you're reading.
That's important. I still have I think I made it into an Instagram post, a text you sent me where you were asking me questions or giving me a suggestion. And then you said, oh, by the way, that kiss, I read it twice and not for editorial reasons. Like I saved it because I loved it so much. I was like, thank you.
Oh, yes, that's true. Oh, the sun's coming through again. Oh, I'm all glowy. I know. So Even If, give a little synopsis of Even If.
Even If is basically, so it's hard. I tell my husband, I'm like, I don't think Even If has a plot. And I know it does, but it's really character driven. So there's just kind of Chuck, who doesn't have really any problems. I mean, he's grieving. I pull in his grief a lot because at the time that I wrote it, I was walking with some friends through grief and I was seeing it totally differently than the way I originally wrote it. When I first wrote the first half of Even If a few years before, Chuck had been kind of dismissive and over his father's death. And after walking some friends through their grief, I realized that was completely unrealistic. So Chuck really just had his head down. He's just kind of going through life. He's not interested in dating. He's just living his life, and he runs into this woman who catches his attention. Like he looks up for the first time. And Lillian, it opens with her basically walking around in the snow in the city, and she's heartbroken and doesn't want to go back to her home because, it says in the beginning of the book. Anyway, she walked in on something bad, and now she's trying to decide what to do. And she ends up moving into this apartment building and quitting her job basically to change her life. And
was everything she saved? I don't remember because now I'm remembering what that instance was that happened. Did she start off as saved?
She was saved in high school, and then something in college. So because she was saved in high school, she had had kind of a full life before, and she went to a Bible college, and a man at the Bible college said to her when he found out that she was not like all the other girls at Bible college, he said, yeah, I could never marry a woman like that. And then she's kind of heartbroken about that. And then he comes to her later to talk about it, and she thinks, oh, well, maybe he changed his mind. And he said, yeah, I talked to all the guys in my dorm, and they all agree with me. And she felt just completely...
Because she had a past, because she wasn't a virgin.
And so Lillian goes through that, like, just, well, and it's not, and I can understand why that would annoy people to think, well, just because a man wouldn't want to, the Lord still does, but she just felt like she had been so wrong about all the things she thought. So she is a believer, but she goes home and doesn't live that way. So anyways, that's where Even If kind of was born, was just this woman she lives in an apartment building that I lived in. And again, it was a little bit of wishing I would have followed Lillian's path, because I had the same experience as Lillian does in the beginning of the story, and I didn't cut it off right away like she does. She just cuts it off and moves on. And I wish I would have done that, and I didn't. I let myself be hurt a little bit more before the Lord just kind of swept in and rescued me. Does that make sense?
And so when Chuck comes to Lillian, you think, oh, such a nice guy. Why isn't she just going all over that? And she was very anxious to be his friend. She was very happy to be his friend, but she didn't trust herself not to ruin it, because we still have libidos. Men are not the only ones. And when you awaken that in yourself, it's hard to have a relationship without that. So I'm sure coming out of that you just don't trust yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought it was such a relevant issue. Now, I know we're spending so much time on that. I'm sorry, but it really is such a fascinating topic to me. But there's a lot of friendships in this book, and not just Chuck's. Lillian has a really good friend. And what was her name? Because you're
Tiffany.
Tiffany?
Right? Yeah, Tiffany.
Tiffany.
The girl who lives in her building.
Yeah, and I want to tell you what somebody wrote about your characters. Let's see if I can find it. Well, first of all, in trending, someone said, I feel like I know Amelia and Creed. Absolutely perfect. I just finished devouring this book. I sit here delightfully content. It was another person who had said, I feel like I know Amelia and Creed. And I felt after I was finished reading Even If that I had spent like a whole summer with people, and then it was over. And I was like, I wish we could like stay friends. I wish they were my neighbors. I wish that I had been one of their friends.
Yeah.
And
me too. Going out in their building.
Yeah. And so I just thought that was you did such a good job, again, of deepening these characters, because they had hangups, they had issues, and those issues painted their world. Even Chuck, grief, even if he doesn't have a huge hangup, even if there's a reason he doesn't want to or doesn't not want to date, because he was fine with dating. Where we are in life colors everything we do. And like you said, in grief, you learned it's like having your head underwater.
Right.
And it's a hard place to be in, because it lasts so long.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand it, and they want you to move on, because in books, time takes care of it, and you move on and you are fine. And that's the thing, is you're never ever over it. I have a friend who lost her husband and she's remarried, but she doesn't forget her first husband. It's not, it's delightful for her that she's married. She loves her second husband, but that doesn't make her not miss her first one, And so that's why I say I had Chuck. I had only known about grief from books. And so Chuck was very dismissive the first time of, oh, it's fine. The Lord's good,
Oh, yeah.
And it was when I rewrote it and really got back into it, it was, tell me about your dad. My dad's birthday is going to be a bad day. It's the only time we see Chuck grumpy is because it's his dad's birthday and he has to grapple with that. And, so Lillian does the right thing. She doesn't know she's doing the right thing, but it ends up being the right thing in her conversations with him that day. And so I got that from my friends sharing me.
Yes. You've created a fairly deep friendship. Either there was a friendship already in place, like as in trending, there is a past friendship in place that gets rekindled.
Right.
And then, and even if they do become friends for quite a bit, right, and you just really do enjoy, you want it. It's always underlying. You're like, oh, just get around to it. But it is that tension that plays out. So when it really happens, you're like, yes, okay, finally. I don't know how you held out that long. And so it's a really good book, and they're ups and downs. So yeah, really, really great with that. Now, in Even If, there was that character we talked about, Tiffany, and so now I want to move on to, do you have any future books? One of your reviewers had said, either she was ready for the next one, or she can't wait for that. And I saw that was written in 2018, and so she's probably been on the edge of her seat like I have. And so you mentioned to me that this new book you're writing is a Tiffany story. Am I allowed to
Tiffany yet? It's Grace, actually.
Oh, Grace's story.
So Grace is a more minor character in Even If, but it's
because you did really. Tiffany was dating Chuck's friend.
Right. And I cannot figure out what to do with Tiffany and Felix, but they're both in the next book as well. I mean, everyone's in the next book, but it's from Grace's perspective this time.
Yeah.
So that's, for some reason, she gets her story first. I actually also have a story for, I can't remember her name, but there was kind of an awful character in Even If, like you have a hard time liking her. There's not a very nice woman in Even If. And I actually have a story for her. Like, I know why she's awful, and I want her, she's not awful. Like, she's misunderstood. So.
You know what? That's funny. I think you could probably do that in most of your characters. You could have created a story about the barista. Like if you had wanted to, because you slip in just a little bit here and a little bit there, because all your characters, it seems like to me, are more than just a flat, drawing on a page. They're in your head, and you knew that barista had a backstory, even if you never bring it up again. Why they are the way they are.
The barista's backstory. I'm trying to remember what barista was in there.
Well, it was just the coffee shop that they go to, and
so like the owner, is that?
Yeah, and you may not even have a story for her, but I think you can't help yourself. You know your characters, and you probably see their past in your head.
Yeah.
It's there.
Well, sometimes they don't tell me until it's being written, and I'm like, oh, all right. Like that happened with the first book. Kayet is a big character in The Earth is Full, and he was never part of any planning. He just kind of walked in one day, and then all of a sudden his backstory was in there, and he became one of the biggest characters in the book. And so, which I have a friend that hates him, absolutely hates him. She just thinks he's a creep. So I'm like,
oh my,
oh, okay, I need to figure that out. So anyways,
so Grace, remind me of who Grace is then, because it's been
Grace is actually, she comes to stay with Lillian for a weekend, and she's one of the reasons Lillian feels not worthy of Chuck, because Grace is an author. She writes Bible studies, and she tours and does a conference on purity.
She thinks Chuck ought to be with her, right?
She's Chuck's friend. They all grew up together, Chuck, Felix, and Tiffany, and Grace. And actually, Grace comes in and does a lot of the work of, the Lord uses her as a tool to help. For one, she approaches Chuck about, you have some anger issues that you're not aware of that you need to take care of. And she helps Lillian just really accept that the Lord loves her just as she is, and so she kind of is the push for.
Okay, it's all coming to me. It's all falling into place, because I had forgotten that character. You already told me the plot of your next book. And so now I'm like, oh, author makes sense. Yes, I do. Now just Chuck and Lillian make any sort of a debut in this, like even a little bit?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. They're in.
Oh,
I've written a few.
I got chills just now.
Chuck and Lillian and Tiffany and Felix, they're all around. And actually, the book ends, like I was sending you text messages from camp. I was camping in an area close to me, and it's where Even If really wraps up, is at this exact spot. So I was trying to send pictures, but it wasn't working as well as I wanted. But Grace actually ends up living in that place for her book. So it's all based out of that area.
Okay.
So I was really thinking of Grace a lot when I was camping.
Do you feel comfortable sharing the plot of your next book, or is that a secret?
I can share a little bit of the plot. So there's Grace. I'm still working it through, but she decides to not be on this tour anymore. She wants to be, being on a tour like that, you feel like you're in ministry, but you're in a way you're not, because you're not being able to connect with people and be part of a church and do those things. And she just feels the need to be part of this ministry. And the ministry she joins is a ministry of Bible college in a small town, but part of it, she's there to be a mentor to girls that are living there that have graduated or aged out of the foster care system. So she's there with this other person to just give them life skills and be a safe place for them while they're going to college. They need a place. I mean, what college student doesn't need a family to go back to deal with college? And they don't have that. And so Grace is one of a few mentors that are set up to be that for these kids. But she has a secret life and a secret profession. And that's all I'll say about that. And that it plays a big part in her story too.
Oh, that's the part I wanted you to share. Okay.
I don't want to share that part yet. Not yet.
Oh, but it's good. You told me what the plot to that little part that you just left out, and I was like, oh, okay, get it done.
I'm working on it. I am. It's there. It's amazing because the Lord is doing the same thing with this book that he's done for some in the past, where I'll have an idea and I'm not totally sure it's the right one. And then something will happen in my life or on Facebook or whatever to show me my idea is real. It's hard to explain, but it just happened yesterday. I was like getting teared up reading something to Richard, like, Richard, this is just confirmation that this was the right way to go. And I need to get it on paper. It's so hard. I wish I could write faster, and I can write pretty fast, but I'm just like, I don't want to write so fast. I miss depth, but
right. And you've been blocked for a while with this book, and
it's more that I've been blocked on time. The timing of my old house that we lived in, I had a desk downstairs and all the family's bedrooms were upstairs. So I got in the habit of coming downstairs and just having the whole space to myself and writing alone in the dark, and it was wonderful in the mornings. But then we moved, and now my desk is in my bedroom, and my husband stays up we have very different hours. Like, I get up really early and he does not, and I go to bed early, he stays up later, and he needs his sleep. He has MS, and so he really needs to be able, if he's in a good sleep cycle, I don't want to mess with him. And I could just take the computer out in the living room, but then kids, and I just feel weird. My kids read over my shoulder, and I'm like, don't read it. I just get don't look at it. It's not bad. It's just, anyway. So I need to get myself out of that. I just need to pull myself out of that and get up earlier, I guess. So
how far along are you on? I mean, I hate to do that because I've been on the last 2 chapters of my book now for months. Chapters mean nothing.
Anyway, because I've written it completely twice.
Yeah.
But now I'm totally rewriting it. So, but I'm taking parts of it, like
Yes.
So I'm done, but I'm not. But
I'm not upcycling.
I'm done, but I haven't even started. It's just like I started I decided to start a whole new thing and just see if I need to borrow from the other one first. Does that make sense? Starting over again, but this time it has a purpose. I've changed the title, so.
You did?
I did. I changed the title.
Oh, I liked your other title too, so.
Well, yeah, that's still the working title, and that might be a subtitle.
Okay. Oh, good one. So, I can see that. Oh, we're all talking about stuff no one knows now, so I'll just put it. The privilege. I feel privileged. Before we go, I do want to mention one thing I forgot that I enjoyed so much about trending. Trending. I'm getting them confused in my head. The duality of Creed. Maybe it's not quite a duality, but you do a little bit of backstory where you put us back in to their college days or high school days rather, where they're friends, and where, remember, Creed is a little bit of, oh my gosh, I'm really gonna get these messed up. Yeah, Creed is a little bit of a playboy, right? So you reveal a little bit of their backstory by putting us in a scene where they're back in high school. Amelia and Creed are back in high school before he's truly a Christian or walking with the Lord.
Right.
And so the main story is him as a Christian, as a father, a single dad, but you take us back to some of these scenes. You take us back into these scenes, and I can actually feel the absence of the Spirit in him. I think you did a really good job of that, because it's like he's the same personality, but when I read about him present day, because that's how I was introduced to him, I see him as a godly man. When you refer back to his conversations with Amelia as they're happening, I still see the same personality and enjoy him as a person, but I see him as kind of that jock, high schooler, playboy, sort of absent the Spirit. Cool. And I was like, you did a really good job there, because
I did that on purpose.
What?
I don't even know if that was on purpose, but that's awesome. That's what you got.
You did it so well. So I just wanted to point that out. I really enjoyed that. But I want to end with these reviews. And I believe these were even if reviews. My writing is so messy and jumbled, but regardless, they will go for any of them. But one of them said, "What have I accomplished today? Nothing but reading this entire book."
Those are my favorites. I love making people waste time. Just kidding.
The other one said, "One of those books you pick up and neglect everything else. Oops, sorry, children."
Oh, was that you?
No, but that would be like me.
I have done the same.
Yes, so have I. And then another person wrote, that person who was in 2018 wrote, "Can't wait for the next book. Would love even more if this were a sequel, or if there was a sequel to even it." So that's why I was so excited. I was like, oh, they don't even know, or do they? Well, Bethany, I just want to thank you for coming on. I always love talking to you all the time. I love your books, so keep on.
Thank you. I love your books. I love that they're different too. Are historical on the one side and contemporary.
That's right. We're two bookends.
Yes, that's true.
All right. You have a great day.
Thank you, you too.